Let's unbox the Black Series 6-inch figure of Shin Hati from the Ahsoka live-action series.
Villa Varykino. If it's Star Wars, we collect it.
Hello there, thanks for visiting Villa Varykino. This past weekend we attended the Armageddon Expo convention held in Palmerston North, which had a very special Star Wars celebrity guest, Ivanna Sakhno, who portrayed Shin Hati in the live-action Ahsoka series. Ivanna was an absolute delight to meet in person. Of course, we had to get her autograph to add to our collection, and we attended her main stage panel where she told some fantastic stories of her time working on the Ahsoka series, and of course a few stories about working with the late Ray Stevenson, who portrayed Shin Hati's master, Baylan Skoll. So to carry on the excitement of meeting Ivanna in person, of course I wanted to open up a Shin Hati collectible that is still in its box. I have the Black Series 6-inch version of Shin Hati from the Ahsoka series to unbox today. So thanks so much for hanging out with me today. Coming up really soon, we'll get the Shin Hati figure out of the packaging so we can check out all of the details. But first, let's take one last look at the packaging. This is the first version of Shin Hati in the Black Series 6-inch line when Hasbro was still doing their side angle window style boxes, which is a little bit older now, but I still really like it. We've got a nice big window here showing the Shin Hati figure here in the front with her one lightsaber accessory. For the Ahsoka series, we have this interesting green tone accent stripe here that reads Star Wars Ahsoka, and that same color is used for the character name Shin Hati. Of course, we've got the Star Wars and Black Series logo there at the top. Moving on to the side, we have the really nice artwork here of Shin Hati. Though I have to say, having just recently met Ivanna, who portrayed Shin Hati, I don't think this is a terribly good likeness for her. Something about the face, and I think the hair is just a little bit flat for the character. I do really like the pose. We've got some really nice costume details visible and the two-handed grip there on the lightsaber. We've got that green accent color coming through at the bottom and the character name Shin Hati there in black. On the back, we have that same accent color stripe here. Shin Hati is number 10 from the Black Series line from the Ahsoka series. We also have that same art here on the back, a little bit more cropped, a little bit zoomed in. We can see some of those really nice costume details here. On the side, we have a little bit of a blurb, but Hasbro was avoiding spoilers, so it is about the show and not Shin Hati herself. It reads, set after the fall of the Empire, Ahsoka follows former Jedi Knight Ahsoka Tano as she investigates an emerging threat to a vulnerable galaxy, and that blurb is repeated in a few different languages there. The bottom of the box is just warning, copyright, barcode, all of that kind of stuff, and we have a small window there in the top to let in a little bit of light. So you may be aware that this is the first version of Shin Hati. She is currently available for pre-order in a new version entitled Shin Hati Arcana, where she comes with a soft goods cloak. Until we're able to get our hands on that version of the figure, I don't know if it is a complete reissue of this one, but I know I am a fan of Shin Hati. I'm definitely going to be picking that one up. And also of note, because it is a new figure, that version is going to come in the new style of packaging, which we've recently seen for the Acolyte series of Black Series figures. Personally, I really do like that new style of packaging, so I'm probably going to be buying that one twice. One to open and one to keep boxed, because I really like the packaging. I really like Shin Hati, so sometimes with my favorite characters, I like to keep one boxed and one opened. But for now, I'm definitely going to be opening this one, so let's get stuck into it. Now I have the Shin Hati figure and her lightsaber accessory out of the packaging so we can take a closer look, and of course I'm going to start with Shin herself. I'm really excited that Hasbro didn't wait too long to give us a Shin Hati figure in the Black Series line. Sometimes when it comes to brand new characters, we have to wait quite a long time to get them in action figure form because Hasbro and Lucasfilm are trying to avoid spoilers. I'm thinking, of course, the Acolyte series. We don't have any ETA for the Stranger in any kind of format. TVC, Black Series, we don't even know when we're going to be able to get that figure. So when it comes to Shin Hati and Baylan Skoll, I'm really excited that we didn't have to wait long to get them for our action figure collections. So I'm going to go through all of the costume details, check out all of the articulation and paint job, and like usual, I'm going to start with the face. So I know for Shin Hati in particular, there was a little bit of online discussion, particularly surrounding her hair, and I have to say it isn't my favorite rendition of female hairstyles for a Hasbro figure. Something about it feels a little bit larger than it should be, and if I tip it up, You can kind of see that there is an actual gap between her forehead and her bangs or fringe there. And I kind of feel like it gives it a little bit more of a sort of a helmet appearance because of that gap at the forehead. And if I turn around, it doesn't have kind of any two-tone coloring. Shin Hati's hair is blonde in the show. We do get a little bit of a darker tone with some of her roots showing through. And of course, blonde is never a flat color. But for here, Hasbro has just gone with a flat yellow color. There is no sort of accents. I kind of wish it was a paler color with a little bit of a yellow accent sort of wash over it to really highlight the details. And one other tiny little thing, she has a little bit of a leather wrapping at the base of her braid, and we don't have any paintwork on her braid here. So kind of a shame we don't get just a little bit of paint here. Maybe it was a little bit complicated to paint this very small piece, but I think it's a little bit of a shame. We can see it sculpted there, but it isn't accented in paint. It's just kind of just there in her blonde braid color. Overall, I think this is a pretty cool face sculpt. We even have the freckles that appear on Ivanna's face in the show. We've got some fantastic fine detail around the eyes. We've got even a little bit of pink tone to the cheeks there. And of course, we've got a highlight to the lips. So overall, I really like the face. Good neutral face. She's not sort of pulling an expression or anything like that. I just kind of wish the hair was just a little bit better. Kind of reminds me of one of Hasbro's 3.75-inch Mara Jade figures that they did some time ago, where it kind of just looked like it was sort of stuck on over the hair. It was just a little bit big and sort of a bit cartoony, but overall, I'm just excited that we've got a Shin Hati costume. Of course, I know sometimes female hairstyles can be very complicated to try and render. I do like that they did it as a separate piece, so we've got some sort of nice definition around at the temples and the cheeks. But there's just, I kind of wish it was just perhaps a little bit more closer fit to the head and just a little bit more in the terms of the color. The actual shape around the back is really nice. I do like that. The way that it sort of hits across the shoulders there, very nice. Moving down, Shin Hati's got a really interesting costume. There are sort of elements of Balin's armor and outfit. She takes a lot of inspiration from her master's gear. So we've got some shoulder pieces, bicep armor, gauntlets here on the forearms, armor on the back of the hands, and some plates here on the hips as well. She's got sort of a vest here with these sort of triangular sort of arrow pointing down shapes stitched in there, which is really nice. We can see that this has got a little bit of an undershirt here in the way that they have constructed it, so we can get some articulation there. I can kind of see, looking through there, I can see the sort of attachment point for the shoulder armor. And I'm hoping that we'll be able to, this feels like that's attached at that one little point there. So hopefully the shoulder armor will move a little bit so that we can move the arms around. As usual, I like to put my force users in a little bit of a lightsaber holding pose. Of course, with this thick skirt, I'm probably not going to get too much articulation and posability in the lower half. So of course, I'm going to get her into a cool lightsaber pose here with her arms. So I'm hoping these shoulder pieces will be able to move so that we can really move her arms into a good position. Taking a closer look at the arm armor here, we can see that it is silver with a little bit of a digital print over the top to give it a sort of a weathered look. And personally for me, I think this is kind of an interesting way of doing it. I can just make out the tiny dots of sort of this brown beige sort of weathering print. But I have to say, I think they went a little bit overboard with the weathering on the shoulder belt. In the show, it catches the light, it's silver, it kind of feels a little bit more like this piece here on the biceps. And when I look at this under the light, it's not catching. It almost doesn't look silver at all. I think it's almost like this color, and then they've done the digital printing over the top. There's no silver to it, which is a real shame because it definitely is silver in the show. So I don't know why they haven't done silver for the shoulder pieces and then the sort of weathering the same as the bicep pieces, because they do look very close in finish in the show. So I do think this should have been silver. It looks like they've used this color for the shoulder pieces. But I do like the sculpting details. We've got the tiny little arrows, sort of the ridges there at the top. Really nice shape. If I look really close, you can kind of see the digital printing. You can kind of see it best here on that hip plate there. Really fine detail. Again, the hip plates, I feel they should have been silver, and these look gray with that weathering sort of printing over the top. I wish that all of the armor was like these pieces here, that it was silver with the weathering over the top, because I really like the way that that weathering has kind of just made it look a little bit more worn and lived in, because they do have a slight weathered finish in the show. We can see that we've got some really fine details here, sort of some lights, as it were, on her gauntlets there. We've got a red and yellow, and on this side, again, a red and yellow. And we've got the silver with weathering on the back of her hands as well. Moving down for the other armor components, the Shin armor on Shin Hati is silver with a lot of weathering. And again, you can see that silver really picking up on the light. It just kind of makes the non-silver pieces really stand out, because on the show, they are silver. So I'm not quite sure why Hasbro did that. I don't think that would have been terribly hard to do. So on the back, we've got pretty plain details here, but of course we have to match her costume from the show. Now she's got these really interesting sort of plates. They are, I think in technical terms, they are actually sort of hooking and eye sort of style clasps that you would use on cloaks, but they have used multiples of them to sort of join up down the back of her vest here. So in the show, they are a metal. It's a little bit hard to tell what kind of color. I believe they are silver just because of the other silver components. That would make the most sense. But here they are unpainted. They shouldn't be. The metal sort of fixtures down the back of her vest are probably not the same color as the fabric of her vest. They are definitely a different color in the show. So I kind of wish those were painted there. And overall, the fabric components of her in this Black Series form are well sculpted, but there's just something a little bit flat about it. There is no weathering or antiquing or sort of accent point painting on this, because of course Shin Hati has these really interesting sort of trim lines on her vest that we don't have any kind of sort of accent coloring to sort of highlight those. And for the skirts, they are just sort of the flat colors. We've got the two tabards hanging down the front here in a slightly different color tone, which is accurate. I do like the colors that they have used here. I think it's a pretty good representation of her costume in the film. And we can see that we've got some really interesting textures. We've got the sort of the weathering, the fringe here at the bottom where it's all just sort of tattered. We've got a little bit of a repair job here. I like the sculpting. There's just something that's just reading just a little bit flat about the fabrics, because we don't have any kind of little accent or weathering here. Just a little bit more on the plastic side. And I don't really know why it's sort of reading just a little bit plastic to me. I don't know if it's just because it's just so much of it all being the same. It just kind of cumulatively kind of gives that effect, because I'm not really expecting there to be much in the way of different paint work here on the skirt sections in particular. So I'm not sure why it's particularly reading like that. Moving down, we've got a black belt with a silver buckle detail here, which the hip plates do hang off of. We've got a little hook attachment point here to hang her lightsaber from, but I have to say this should probably be painted, as it's currently the same color as the fabric of her tunic. So this is probably a metal. It should probably be a silver or a black, to be honest. Small detail, but it's probably not the same color as her fabric there. We've even got the small stitching detail on her sort of undershirt here that is showing here at the sleeves. We can see that we've got the stitching detail, nice accuracy there. And of course, I do like black when it comes to undergear, because it always hides articulation points quite nicely there. We can see that we've just got the little bit of a hinge showing here at the front, but because her under tunic does actually have some stitch lines, it does a pretty good job of hiding that all in there. So her big skirt. So in the show, it's a really complicated skirt. It's made with lots of strips and panels. And for this figure, we can see that in the back, it's all sculpted as one. We don't have any kind of splits here. We can see where the sculpting is showing that we've got a strip of fabric hanging down here at the back. And as usual, like we see on lots of Hasbro figures, we've got a split up the side. But this hip armor feels like it is attached. And if I just swing her arm up out of the way, I can kind of lift it a little bit, but I feel like it's not like attached here. It's not rubbery. I can't pull it up. And I really don't want to pull it up more than that, because it kind of feels like it's attached or pinned or glued kind of around here. So it kind of begs the question, why do we have this split? Because that's not really, if this is attached over the split, then I feel nervous even doing this, because we're not really going to be moving the legs much if this is holding those two skirt pieces, and they're not rubbery. This is quite thick plastic, especially when we think about all of these sort of grooves and folds with the way that fabric's holding. This is really thick. It's not rubbery at all. And again, we've got the same thing on this side, where that hip armor feels like it is holding these two skirt pieces together. So technically we've got a little bit of a gap. I know there is actually sort of some splits here in the side of Shin Hati's sort of fabric folds and costume pieces there. So it does make sense, but we're going to get absolutely no articulation. If I have a little bit of a peek, I don't see a top articulation line in the top of her thighs. And I'm not even going to get close on that side. I don't think, I mean, I can certainly get a little bit of, no, I don't think it's there. Okay. If I do get a bit of a wiggle, it's because it's at the knees. And looking up under her skirt very carefully, we can see that she does have the knee armor there on her knees, which is quite nice. And if I just quickly check there, the knee armor is attached to the thighs rather than the lower legs. So we do see the articulation showing there a little bit when we bend her knee back. Because of where the skirt is, we're only going to be able to get her leg back that far. That's a very hard hit there. I'm not able to push that up any further there. And we've got some articulation there in the ankle, but again, it's hitting here. So that is as far back as I'm going to get there. Not much there in the lower legs, as I suspected because of that. This one I'm only going to get to there because it's hanging just a little bit lower there in the back. So that is as far back as I'm going to get, and her boot is only going to tip back to there. So that is a really small range there for that particular leg. So again, she's not going to be doing anything too adventurous. I do like the paintwork here on the straps on her sort of boot spats here. You can see all the little buckles. Again, I kind of wish the buckles were accented. They wouldn't be the same fabric as the leather straps. Most buckles or hardware on leather straps tend to be a black or a silver. So again, very tiny little paint details that I think would have just really sort of just amped this figure up a little bit there, especially when we don't have quite the articulation. Sometimes you have a payoff, you know, a trade. You can take accuracy or articulation. So if we don't have the articulation, perhaps they could have given us a little bit more accuracy. We do have things like here, like the little insert, lots of fabulous costume details replicated here. I just wish we just had maybe just a tiny bit more paint, just to kind of make up for the fact that we're not able to pose here quite as adventurously as we can some of our other figures. She does have waist articulation. We're not really going to get much in the way of a backwards and forwards. It's not really holding. I can get her back there. She can lean forward really minimally, and it's not holding in place. She flings back pretty quickly. I can turn her to the side, but it is very stiff. Doesn't feel like she wants to go. I can kind of get it to there and it finally grips. But again, it does feel very stiff and there's a bit of a click there. So let's test out her arms, because that's going to be basically the bulk of the articulation going on here. We can get her head turning some really nice, not so much in the back because her hair does hit. We can get her looking down and some really good side-to-side motion there. Her Padawan braid is quite flexible, so it's not going to get in the way, and I don't feel too worried about sort of hitting it anywhere when I turn her head around. But let's check out her arms, because I'm a little bit worried about those shoulder pieces. I don't want to stress them out, and I feel like the peak of her vest here is going to stop us from lifting this. I know it's got that sort of small little attachment point, so we've got a little bit of wiggle room, but because we've got this flat edge, I can't get it up over that piece, because when I get to here, it's kind of blocking the arm. I don't really want to stress test that articulation point. Maybe if I got in there, I could kind of really wiggle it around, but I can see that attachment point. You can just make out that little black line coming to the shoulder bell, and they're quite small and I don't want to rip them off. So that is probably about as high up as, wow, that's quite interesting. If I tip her arm to the back, you can kind of see just how sort of outward that vest part comes. So when I put that in line, that section there of her sort of shoulder armor is just completely hitting on the vest. So when I go like that, it's just hitting. I'm actually rocking her torso backwards and forwards rather than actually moving her arm up. That's kind of interesting. So I'm not going to get her very high on the arms there. That's very interesting. I wasn't kind of expecting that. So I can get her arm at the elbow to about there. We can see the articulation and the sculpting there. As usual, the fabric kind of comes down a little bit there to sort of hide that join. And we'll do the same on the other side. So I can get her hands together for a two-handed pose for her lightsaber, but to be honest, that's about as far as I'm going to be able to get her. She's going to be standing straight up with her hands holding her lightsaber, not much else really going on. Of course I could, hold her lightsaber out to the side or anything like that, but she's not going to be a really poseable figure, which is kind of interesting. I generally think for a figure with such small armor components and the majority of it being sort of fabric in the original reference costume, that we would have a little bit more movability. Sometimes I think the really heavily armored characters are going to be the ones that are restricted. Really interesting to see just how limited we have in the way of articulation and posing for this character. So overall, just a few tiny things that I would have changed in the paint, mostly because of the armor plates. I wish they were silver rather than the sort of dull gray with the weathering over the top. I just think that that would have added it. Just a few other tiny little things, like the Padawan braid detail, maybe some extra paint there on the buckles, really minor things. Overall, I think it looks pretty cool. And I'm really happy to have Shin Hati for my Black Series collection. Still waiting on the TVC 3.75 inch figure. Though of course that poor line does seem to lag behind the Black Series at times. So let's move on to her lightsaber. So you can probably tell mine is a little bit bent, not exactly straight. The way that it was inserted into the tray kind of put a little bit of tension on it, and I don't like that. I don't like it when it goes through the holes in the tray. I like it when it's just sitting in there with a little bit of tape to hold it in place. This under tension makes me anxious. And talking about paint on this, we can notice one really obvious error with this one, or shall I say just inaccuracy. Shin Hati has a section of white or cream on her saber hilt. This sort of wrapping section here should be white. Now looking at the end of this hilt, we can see that we've got a ring to hang it off her sort of belt hook there. So I can gather that this is probably all made from a grey plastic. So I feel like this should have been painted rather than being left that base plastic color. We've got some really nice dark metallic for the emitter there. We've got the silver accent points. This should have been white, and I know it will probably be not very visible once I put it in your hands, but still, I do think that should have been white or cream at the very best. We can see that we've got sort of an orangey red tone lightsaber here. Of course, they're very orange in the show. It really does depend on lighting as to whether your plastic lightsabers look very red or very orange. Even good red lightsabers can end up looking quite orange over time or in different lighting. So it's a really hard thing to call. So we can see that we've got a little hoop there, a little ring there to attach it onto her belt. And of course, Black Series sabers have removable blades. I mentioned this a lot. I wish that they would just give us a lightsaber with a ring just to hang on the belt and a full bladed one, because I really don't like pulling these two pieces apart. If you manage to break the little plastic pin, you can no longer do a lightsaber pose with your character. So I'm going to try and remove this very carefully. That is very, very attached. Okay. That's very, very attached. Okay, that one I don't think is actually going to come off very well. I am probably going to leave that attached. That was a really, really good pull, and I only budged that a tiny, tiny amount. So I'm probably not going to bother taking that off, because I know for me personally, I'm going to be holding it in her hands, but I will just test out this ring anyway. So we've got that little hook there on her belt. So imagining that this is just the hilt, we can kind of see how that would sit. That hangs nicely. It attaches very well. You can see how much of the hook is inserted there through the ring, which is quite good. It feels nice and secure. And it's actually just like a it wouldn't fly off unless you really knocked it, which is good. But again, especially when you go and put it against her tunic there, it's such a shame that this isn't white. It's such a shame because, of course, it's so much more visible here when it's hanging on her belt than it would be in her hands. So a little bit of a shame there. I know that's not too hard to paint if it really, really bothers you, but still, we shouldn't have to. It should be something that Hasbro does for us. If they can do tiny little dots on the armor, then they should be able to paint the lightsaber hilts. So we can see that we've got a grip there with an extended finger on her right hand, and her left hand is kind of not quite a C grip. It's a little bit more of sort of a hand gesture, which is kind of interesting. Often the left hand on most figures is generally just sort of a generic sort of holding grip. So I'm hoping that this won't be too hard to get through. She does have a nice slender hilt with not too many sort of extra sort of bumps and things like that. Obviously this point's going to be at the top of her hand. So I'm hoping that we'll just be able to wiggle this through her hand and get her to hold it. It's a little bit of an awkward grip there. It doesn't necessarily look like she's realistically holding the lightsaber. I don't think we would have the fingers extended. You can see they're not even really wrapped around the lightsaber, but she does hold it. And if I can use the articulation there on her hands to get a little bit more of a pose. Let's see. I think this is going to be a little bit tricky because of how oddly shaped her two hands are for a lightsaber grip. Just going to see how well she can actually hold it in this hand because it feels very open. So it's not really a grip. It's just kind of sitting around the saber. If I put that there and sort of put it, she's not holding that at all. It's just gripping there at her thumb, but as soon as I let go, the saber is coming with me. So that's kind of odd. I wasn't expecting that. Usually Hasbro can do a two-handed lightsaber grip pretty well. So it'll take me a little bit of work, but yeah, it's just a slightly odd grip with both her hands. So I'll definitely have to play around with the posing on that one. So for now that I've got Shin Hati now with her lightsaber, let's just grab her master, Baylan's skull, because I really wanted to see these two together. So we'll get him standing up. He is a bit of a heavier figure because, of course, I wanted to see the two of them together. We see them a lot in the show together. So now that I have them together, we can see that they are very close in height, which is a shame because, of course, Shin Hati is not the same height as her master Baylan. She should be shorter. So in terms of accuracy, this one is a little bit off, I have to say, which is a shame. I don't know, I guess it would be in the legs because the rest of it looks well proportioned in terms of the details. So I'd say perhaps a little shorter in the legs to make her appropriately sort of the same height, to be, yeah, the right height next to Baylan there. We can see that Baylan just has a little bit more of an oomph when it comes to his paint work as well. He has weathering and sort of texture added paint work there on his hair to really accent in the different sort of tones of hair color. And he has all this fantastic sort of antiquing and weathering on his armor parts. A lot of his costume does look black, but there's something that looks a little bit more detailed. We've got a little bit more texture here, and we've got this sort of shiny plastic of the belt hanging down there. It just gives it a little bit more, I don't know, just somehow looks less flat than Shin Hati's skirt does. Overall, I'm really happy to finally have these two together out of their boxes so I can pose them in my Black Series display. I am really excited that Hasbro is releasing both of these figures in updated versions, updated in, well, in new packaging with soft goods cloaks. We'll have to wait and see whether Hasbro will make any tweaks to either of the sculpting and paint apps. Sometimes they do that, sometimes they take the opportunity of a reissue to just improve on a few things. We see that with some of their vintage collection carded figures. Sometimes they just tweak a few things, but we'll have to wait and see and do a comparison. Those ones are due out in October of this year. I'm very excited. I love these characters. I'm going to keep buying different versions of their action figures because I think that they're really cool. And for both of these, I'm probably going to keep a version in that new style packaging as well. I really love those new boxes. So I think these two look really cool. I do think the Shin Hati figure was not executed quite as nicely as the Baylan figure, but I'm so excited that we didn't have to wait ages and ages to get either of these, considering they were new, they were kind of mysterious. I just really like that. I'm really hoping that we just get more merch in general of these two really fabulous characters. I cannot wait to see what happens in Ahsoka Series 2. I know there are some complications there because the actor portraying Baylan Skoll sadly passed away, but I really hope we see more of both of these characters in the continuing Star Wars stories. So there we go. That was the Shin Hati Black Series figure from the Ahsoka live action series. Really exciting to unbox that after meeting Shin Hati herself, Ivanna Sakhno, at a recent convention here in New Zealand. So thank you so much for hanging out with me today as I opened up another Star Wars collectible and had a lot of fun. I hope you have a wonderful morning, afternoon or evening, wherever you are in the galaxy, and let's hang out again very soon for more Star Wars fun. May the Force be with you. If you're a Black Series fan, I also unboxed the Baylan Skoll figure. That video is linked here in case you haven't already seen it, as well as our whole Black Series unboxing playlist. This is the way.